week is a lot different than a normal DFS week, but there's also a lot to, I think, talk about even before we get into the plays. The motivation factor is the main thing here. It's almost like a mixture between like preseason DFS, if anyone plays NBA DFS, like the news, the motivation, which teams are actually going to be trotting out their starters, which teams are not going to be, which teams we have no idea. Like that's the whole, like, I guess, name of the game. We're going to have another video later on in the week with Reeves to kind of go through the specific teams, but we'll touch on that a little bit throughout this video as well. But what are your thoughts about this week, Jay? Because it is so much different than the other weeks.
It is, and that's why we're talking locks in smaller fields. And for this purpose in this show alone, I'm focusing a lot, and we're going to kind of touch on these spots, is I'm focusing a lot on teams I know have something to play for. And I'm not even speculating with like the Chargers. The Chargers should conceivively have something to play because if they win, they avoid going to Cincinnati or Buffalo. They would go to the winner of the Texans or the Titans and Jaguars division. So it's much better, much better. And you would say, hey, why wouldn't the Chargers go on? But you've had injuries to Herbert, Mike Williams, Keenan Allen. Eckler's been banged up. Do they do that? Do they maybe, have a lead in the halftime and they're saying like, let's rest everybody because it looks like we're going to win. So that's why I bring that up only for this point is like, in bigger field tournaments, of course, a lot of these guys are going to be more in play. But for this, I'm going to focus mainly on, do I know they're out there to win 100% and playing the entire game?
There's even another layer to this too. Like the Chargers example is a great one because that's a game that is at the 4 p.m. slate. So they actually have to watch and see what happens with Baltimore at 1 p.m. Right. So that could impact things as well. And I guess this does make like an interesting late swap slate and an interesting tournament slate, but it's not easy. Like it's definitely more variance than normal.
Yeah. And then you just brought up the second point about it too, is this is probably one of the biggest, if not the biggest late swap potential weeks of all of them, because everything happened at 4. And then there are so many games that matter at 4:00 that you can see a lot of that happening.
Yeah. We'll talk about that with JM on the GPP video. So make sure you guys check that out. But what I would do from a tournament perspective is try and figure out some of these like in between type of things where we don't know exactly what's going to happen, or like where we do have really big implications at 1 p.m. So I think that's an interesting conversation to have, but not on this show. We're going to talk about the best plays, Jake. So let's go through and talk about the quarterback position first. Dak Prescott, 6,600 in this one. Again, another one of these spots where like getting him at like kind of a cheaper price tag. But again, like Dallas is one of those teams that we're not too worried about, right? As long as Philadelphia and San Francisco are at least close in that game, like this isn't one that we should be too worried about.
No, it's definitely not one we should worry about. It's also at the same time, how much scoreboard watching is going to be, I think that's the third layer. That's a little bit too much because, I mean, you can't do anything at that point. And you can't be like, oh, Dallas is watching the Eagles game and seeing that they're waxing the Giants in the third quarter. They're going to play for all intents and purposes. I mean, there's some teams that are like locked it. There's only so much you can do nowadays, but they like lock they don't put it on the scoreboard. The stadium doesn't announce it, all that type of stuff to try for that point. But we assume the Cowboys are going to be playing all out because they still have a shot at the number 1 seed, given those other scenarios. So I like that Dak Prescott at this reduced price. And of course, when we get to wide receiver, I'll just throw him out right now. If you pair him up with CeeDee Lamb, I love the pairing for the potential you get, especially because it's a matchup that we would normally probably be worried about, but we already know on the other side of the ball, there's a lot of resting going on, and that can include defensive players.
It's super interesting. CeeDee Lamb, you get a nice little price discount off of Justin Jefferson, who I think is probably going to be the highest owned wide receiver on this slate, but we'll get to that shortly. Let's stay at quarterback because we do have a lot to talk about with these Seattle guys. So Geno Smith is $6K in this spot, kind of around that same price point as your next guy as well, Jake, which we can get to in a second on the San Francisco side. But what about Geno?
I think Geno, because the Seahawks have something to play for. Yeah, they're ticked off at the fact that the thing is they're ticked off at the fact that if they win, then the Lions could lay down and then let the Packers win. But let's be honest, that slate, that doesn't matter for this slate because it's not in it. It's the night game. But the Lions aren't going to lay down, even if Seattle wins. It's Dan Campbell's division, and it's Dan Campbell. There's no way they're going to let the Packers just walk over them. They're going to
if there was any sort of like moral victory here, or whatever it may be, right? Like the Lions want to knock out the Packers.
100%. Yeah, maybe if the Lions had a shot at the number 1 pick, maybe, like, but this is not going to happen. So I love that the fact that the Seahawks are playing to get in, and they have to make their decision. They're not even going to be able to scoreboard watch. So they're going to be playing Geno with DK and even Lockett. Lockett's dealing with the leg issue, it seems, again, But I love this matchup for them. I love this play. I love Gino. I know Gino's been disappointing as of late, but again, for the price discount, because I'm going to spend up at some sure options, I'm looking at this, and I'll go right into a why segue. You brought up the other one in San Francisco, and Brock Purdy, his two touchdowns, just get him out there. My concern as we get to running backs here in a second, I know that, but we do know that Brock Purdy's not going to sit, even if this game is out of hand. They're going to get Brock Purdy out there. They're not turning to their second option. They're going to try and win because they're still outside shot at the number 1 seed. So if you want an Ayuk situation or a Kittle situation, I think Brock Purdy is in play. Again, these are discounted prices, and these are guys I know are going to play.
And if by the end of the week people start to get a little bit spooked by Christian McCaffrey, I'll just say at the quarterback position we could see a lot more ownership go to Hurts, go to Josh Allen, and that side of things. So let's talk about running backs. It's an interesting running back slate, starting with Miles Sanders. He's 5,900, and I'll say this too, Jake. This is like one of my big stands early in the week on PrizePicks that you can grab. You can actually get this still at 63.5. So I've got the over there. I've got it closer at about 81, 82 rushing yards. So Run the Sims agrees with me in terms of that side of things. 72% favorite to cash if we were to simulate this slate 10,000 times. So that's one of my favorite prize picks of the week. Sounds like you like him in DFS as well.
I love both sides of that. The Giants' run defense has been exploitable the entire year. We've talked about them many times. The Giants are resting a lot of people. They have 0 to play for. You can't even play spoiler in this game. That's the biggest thing, is because even if they lose, there's still a chance that the Eagles still get the number 1 seed with other losses. So you're not guaranteeing anything by a win. You're going to the playoffs as a seed that you're locked into. They are at 6. They can't get to 5. They can't drop to 7. They're 6. They're just going to either Minnesota or San Francisco, or even potentially, I guess, if they have one of those scenarios, fall down in between. I don't think they can go to Dallas, though. But anyway, point being, they're locked in. So everybody's probably resting. If you want Matt Breida, maybe as a wild on the tournament side of things, but the Giants defense is always going to rest some pieces too. They've been banged up in the secondary, which I know doesn't point too much to Miles Sanders. But if you're talking about a game where, what's the spread right now? It's up to 14, isn't it? It keeps going higher by the day. That's telling you what Vegas thinks is happening too. So with that kind
14.
of spread with Miles Sanders, yes, all over this one.
I think that one's a great play, and I always love when it lines up with the PrizePicks stuff too. Let's talk about your next guy, because this is one that I don't think a lot of ownership is on currently, but could be by the end of the week. But I don't know, man. 20 plus touches, 2 straight games, yet no one wants to play Cam Akers. Explain that to me.
Well, nobody wants to play him because this comes down to perception, and they're pissed off and bitten. And I understand, because I was on the Cam Akers train for the regular season, but that's why you're getting Cam Akers of the disappointment from the regular season. But even if you talk about the regular season, let's talk about it. Double-digit points in each of the last 5 games. And you talk about the touches, near 20, 15 to 20 in every single game. He was the number 1 running back in week 16 against the Denver Broncos. I'm not saying Cam Akers is the best running back on the planet, but he's the only one you can trust in this game. He's going to be used plenty. And by the way, it's the Seahawks run defense. So this is the smash of all smashes, I feel like. And oh my God, I'm ready for this to go sideways. How perfect would it be if we started the season Cam Akers, we got disappointed, we played him as seasonal, and be like, oh, look, he saved himself a little bit, and then disappoints us in week 18. That would be the ultimate comeback.
Yeah. I guess speaking in terms of this entire season, before we move on to the wide receiver position, this is the moment where we're going to make an agreement as a group. If you're watching this video, if it's your first time here, hang out. Just welcome. It doesn't matter. Welcome. I guess give us some feedback in the comments. That would be great. But if you've been with us all season long, if you've been enjoying this, obviously getting Jake's time and his opinions, just hit that subscribe button. That's all I ask. A lot of people are not hitting that subscribe button. I have that on the back end. So about 60% of you watching these videos every single week have not just done that one little thing for us. So I would appreciate it. Let's talk about wide receiver. We already talked about CeeDee Lamb. So let's get to Jacoby Myers. He's 5,100. Definitely one of the mid-range options that people should be paying attention to this week. Yeah,
I think that this is going to be an interesting game altogether. You talk about later ownership in the week. This one might even push higher towards Jacoby Myers because the Patriots still have something to play for.
Yep.
The reason why it might push higher is because there is a scenario, depending on what the NFL, if they announce that the Bills-Bengals game is not going to happen, it's done, it's canceled, it's outright. The Bills can't get to the number 1 seed if the Chiefs win on Saturday. So that means why I'm bringing that up is because if that happens, if the Chiefs win on Saturday as we expect, this Bills game becomes irrelevant. They probably do play their players. Like this is kind of like the Viking situation. Do you get a half from them? Do you get a quarter? Do you get whatever? But you're going to get some of the Bills getting pulled out while the Patriots still have something to play for. The Bills aren't going to try and play spoiler from keeping the Patriots out. They don't care about the Patriots. Let's be honest about it.
Yeah.
They're going to beat them whether they're in the playoffs or not. But you might get some defense pulled out too. And if you get Jacoby Myers going against what could be a high scoring game or even rested players on the Bills side of it, that's why I like Jacoby Myers. The volume and the PPR scoring is why I'm in on him. So yeah, I think at that mid price, if you're looking to save, I think Jacoby Myers is a nice play.
Yep. I like him quite a bit in that range. I guess let's talk about these Seattle guys, because I think this is probably a conversation, or at least by the end of the week, I think that's a stack that's going to be pretty popular. But DK Metcalf, 6,700, Tyler Lockett, 6,400. So it's not a cheap stack by any means, but we've seen these guys get there multiple times throughout this season, and they're probably getting a little bit disrespected as a group, I think, still.
They are. Yeah. And some of it has to do with last week against the Jets. I brought up DK and tournaments being interesting still because, the fact that Sauce Gardner's 85% on the left, and it went sideways, mostly because Geno had a bad game. The entire passing, it didn't work. And, apologies for that if you tried to chase it. I did too in a couple of spots. But this is get back to it. The Rams, they still have some concerns at corner matchup wise, but it's not as bad as it used to be, even with Ramsey or whatever might be out there. The Rams might rest some players. They have nothing to play for, whether or not they play spoiler. But if you're going with the Geno stack, I don't want to knock on wood over here, Joe, but like the last two times we played the Geno, I didn't play it last week because that was tournament, but the last two times we played the Geno stack, it's worked really well. So I'm just saying, if you're looking for the savings and you get DK and Lockett as the upside on that play, I think that's interesting. The only problem here is I don't think you have a bring back. The bring back would be like Cam Akers, but that's not the best bring back with this.
Yeah, I think the Metcalf stuff is awesome, especially on FanDuel. We have DK Metcalf actually as the second highest optimal rate player, even at 7,200. So 17.3% of the lineups do have DK Metcalf in them over on FanDuel. He's still in the top 10 on DraftKings as well, according to the sim. So super.
I see my boy showing up. I'm concerned about Garrett Wilson.
Well, give us the Garrett Wilson take.
Because here's why. What's the one thing you want to protect if you're the Jets? Breece Hall's already out. They're evaluating the quarterback position, but you're talking about a franchise wide receiver for you right here. Do you really run him out there the entire game? Of course, if you do, it's a great price. How many weeks in a row did I give permission to play Garrett Wilson? This is the one where I'm a little bit hesitant at just how much do you risk a rookie in this final game of the season with nothing on the line?
I guess in that same game, Tyler Conklin, 3,600, you're a little bit more comfortable with them risking him, it sounds like.
I do, because it's Mike White's at quarterback. It is Tyler Conklin. It's a great matchup for tight ends. It's a good price for Conklin still. And if you talk about the Garrett Wilson, there's nothing not to risk Tyler Conklin. Who cares? You just roll out Tyler Conklin for the entire game, unless it turns out to be a CJ Uzomah game. But I think the only concern people might have in this one is if it's Skylar Thompson or Mike Glennon at quarterback for the Dolphins. And then does that game just turn out to be a 13-10 misery? And that would be the only concern. But I still think given the tight end options, Conklin would be on the cheap end that I like. There's a lot. The problem is there's a lot of cheap tight ends that are in these situations we already talked about where people might rest. So if you're going to pay up, I go to Dallas Goedert. I'm going back to the Eagles again against the Giants. It's just this is a great spot. I think Goddard's the safest if you can get up to him.
I like Goddard a lot. I guess let's give a little bit of an honorable mention to Freiermuth. I think at 3,800 is at least interesting. And then Mark Andrews.
I'm concerned. That's another one. I'm concerned about the Steelers-Browns game. And just real quick, because I know we got to wrap this up, but the Steelers do have 8 different ways they could get in or 8 things that have to happen for them to get the playoffs.
That's fair.
But if that game's lopsided one way or the other, let's say they're getting destroyed by halftime. Well, now you rest Najee Harris playing Liz Frank the entire year. And what do you risk at that point? And Freiermuth's been banged up. If you're destroying the Browns, same thing. I think they should if it's competitive, but if it slides one way or the other, that would be my concern.
Okay. Fair enough. Let's build a DraftKings lineup, Jake. Do we want to go the Seahawks route with this one? What are your thoughts?
Let's see if we can. Let's do the Seahawks route. We'll put Miles Sanders in there while we're doing it.
Yeah, I love Sanders this week. So we'll get the double with Metcalf, Lockett. I'm confused by Sanders' price, personally. Is there a defense that you're interested in this week? I guess, how are you approaching defense? Do you want one of these teams that's super motivated? Does it not really matter? I think it's going to be relatively spread out this week.
I think it will be. That's why I'd be looking at the cheaper end. I just tried to scroll down on your screen.
Yeah, it's maybe like I think the Vikings are okay because no Justin Fields, 2,900, 2,600
I mean, it's
for
Nathan
the
Peterman.
Jets.
Everybody's
What's
gonna
that?
be on the Vikings, and yeah, because
Yeah,
it's Nathan Peterman for the Bears. I
right.
think the Vikings are. What's the Vikings price again? They're down. They're down, right?
2,900. If you wanted to go a little bit cheaper, you could maybe get the Jets in there at 2,600. I think they're okay.
I think
For
the
the
Jets
record,
are
remember the
definitely in
defense we talked about last week, Jake?
Yeah.
Packers defense we talked about. They were like 2,200 against the Vikings at home or something like that. I was actually at Lambeau. I don't know if I told you that. I went to the
No,
went
you
to the
didn't.
game. First time ever being at Lambeau, so that was pretty fun. But yeah,
Nice.
if Ben's watching this, he had his bachelor party last week at Lambeau. He was making fun of me the entire game. He's a Packers fan. He's like, I heard you talking to Jake about Packers defense, and you didn't even play him on any of your teams. So let's unlock that for the people again this week.
Do that once again.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think the Vikings
Okay.
are a decent play. What was the cheaper end? Like, do we have anybody lower than that?
Maybe Jets at 26, I think is at least reasonable if you
Let's do
wanted to
Jets for now,
go.
just to plug them in.
Yep.
So just go
Maybe
cheap,
Broncos
just,
if we end up seeing like the Chargers sit starters. I don't know. They're
that would be
2,500.
more. That'd be a tournament play.
Yeah, that's fair. Okay, cool.
Yeah, throw the Jets in.
So
and
we
we'll
have
come back because-
5,500 the rest of the way.
Mm,
Who else we gonna get in there?
put Conklin in there. We'll take the
Okay.
savings.
Yep.
And see
So
what
that gets
happens
us to
with the rest of it.
6,100. So plenty of room here if we wanted to pay up at one of these spots.
Oh, that's why. Like, I don't want to. What's the Ken Walker? That's a lot of Jets. But what's Ken
Walker
Walker's?
6,400.
Yeah. Put in Lamb. Put in Lamb and see what.
Yeah,
we
I was
end
gonna
up
say
with that.
CD would probably fit on this type of build. So that's 5,100 the rest of the way. We could probably get your Cam Akers in here if
Yeah,
we have
throw
a
in-
cheaper flex.
Do we have Jacoby Myers? Does that work?
Let's see. We might be close on that. Let's see. Akers. Nope, no Jacoby. We only got 4,900 if we stay with this build.
We'll take out the Vikings and put in the Jets.
Okay, let's get the Jets in there. It gets us to 4,400 in the
Mhm.
flex. So we're kind of looking at. It's not great down here this week. That's
What's,
for sure.
Go back. I didn't check. What's Ayuk's price?
Let's see. 68. Wow.
Take out Lamb and put
Yeah,
in
I think
Ayuk.
maybe it just doesn't fit with Lamb. So we get Ayuk in there. Actually, let's just do this. Let's do Jacoby and see what that leaves us with. So that leaves us with 7,500 in the flex. So basically looking at Devonta Smith, Chubb, Evans, Cook, Godwin. I think
Not
is going to be
Evans.
relatively popular at 72.
Yeah, I wouldn't play any of the Bucks. I think they might rest their entire team.
Yeah.
The entire team. You could play Tony Pollard too, and then
Well, we
get
could
back
get
up on
Ayuk
the
in there and then
defense.
go back to our Vikings D too.
Yeah, or Pollard would still get us back to the Vikings D.
Who do you prefer between Ayuk and Pollard?
I would do Ayuk if we were using Purdy. I would use
Yeah.
Pollard otherwise.